The assassination decision is made here, not at the trial framing everything that follows as execution of a pre-existing verdict. You've probably heard the bizarre, famous story of Jesus cursing a random fig tree on the side of the road.
Right, the one that just seems total out of nowhere.
Yeah, exactly. But what if I told you that wasn't about botany at all? It is a deliberate cutting metaphor. I mean, the tree has leaves but no fruit, right? And the temple has ceremony but no justice. By the end of this deep dive, you will understand how this one act of, well, gardening was actually a death sentence.
Stripping away the Sunday school gloss, basically.
Completely. We're taking a deep dive into the producer briefing for Mark chapter 11. Our goal is to look strictly at the historical context, the intense political tension, and the drama of a Galilean carpenter confronting the fiscal nerve center of Judea. But before we get to the overturned tables and the paralyzed religious court, we have to look at the map.
The geography is huge here.
It really is. So here is the question for you to keep in the back of your mind as we set the scene. Why did the physical, geographical direction that Jesus chose to walk into Jerusalem mathematically guarantee a collision with the Roman Empire?
Well, setting that scene really requires us to look at the actual topography of first-century Jerusalem, because the map itself is it's communicating a massive political and theological message before a single word is even spoken in the text.
Okay, so paint that picture for us. Where are they starting?
Right, so Jesus and his disciples are approaching from the east. They're descending through the villages of Bethany and Bethphage, moving along the Mount of Olives and passing through the Kidron Valley to enter the city.
I hear what you're saying about the map, but if you're listening to this on your commute, that honestly just sounds like a list of ancient travel directions.
Yeah.
Why does arriving from the east rather than, say, the north or south matter so much?
Because to a first-century audience, that specific Eastern approach was charged with immense prophetic weight. I mean, this was a ceremonial road. The text may suggest to a Jewish listener a direct callback to the prophet Ezekiel, specifically Ezekiel 11.
Okay, remind me what happens in Ezekiel 11.
In that text, the glory of God departed Jerusalem, moving eastward over the Mount of Olives. So any pilgrim entering the city from that exact direction down the Mount of Olives was walking that exact axis in reverse.
Oh, wow. So they're tracing the physical path of the returning glory of God.
Exactly. They're retracing the steps.
Wait, hold on. I always picture the entry into Jerusalem as just, I don't know, a spontaneous, humble moment.
Yeah.
Like a poor peasant riding a donkey because he couldn't afford a horse, and some excited locals waving branches.
That's the common assumption, yeah.
But you're saying he is deliberately walking the blueprint of a prophecy? How do we know it was a calculated political move and not just a guy using the only transportation available to him?
We know it because of the staggering level of premeditation Mark describes. I mean, Jesus deliberately pauses the journey to set up his transportation. He sends 2 disciples ahead to a specific village to retrieve an unridden colt.
Right. He even gives them a specific password to use if they're challenged by the owners while taking it.
Yeah, exactly. This isn't spontaneous at all. And the choice of the animal, a donkey, and specifically an unridden colt, is deeply symbolic. It directly invokes the prophet Zechariah, chapter 9, verse 9.
Which describes a coming king arriving humble and riding on a donkey.
You got it. It's an undeniable claim.
That completely changes the framing for me. Instead of a random peasant gathering a crowd, I'm picturing this as a tale of 2 entirely different paradigms colliding in the same city. Because if we look at the historical context of Passover week, you have 2 rival political parades happening simultaneously, right?
Yes, and the visual contrast is absolutely intentional.
So on the west side of Jerusalem, you have the Roman triumphal procession. The Roman prefect, usually Pilate, would ride in with his legions to keep the peace during the festival. Those generals arrive on giant, muscular war horses.
Total military dominance.
Yeah, you'd have the clanking of Roman armor, the smell of incense, the sheer physical intimidation of imperial military dominance. And then, entering from the east, you have Jesus on a donkey. It's a deliberate, profound contrast.
The contrast is the entire point of the demonstration. I mean, the war horse represents conquering force and imperial extraction, but the donkey represents a completely different kind of kingship, one rooted in peace and the prophetic tradition of Israel.
And the crowd totally gets it, don't they?
Crucially, yes. The crowd recognizes exactly what is happening. They aren't just putting on a nice welcoming ceremony. The entry into the city is incredibly loud.
They're spreading their cloaks on the road, cutting branches from the fields, shouting at the top of their lungs.
Yeah, the text gives us the exact words in Mark 11:9-10. They shout, "Hosanna," Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. Blessed is the kingdom of our father David that is coming in the name of the Lord. Hosanna in the highest.
We really need to drill down into the mechanics of that specific shout, though. Hosanna is not just a generic cheer like, hooray, is it?
Not at all. They are explicitly invoking Psalm 118, and in the Jewish tradition, that is a coronation text. It is a royal psalm used for a king.
Which brings us back to the Roman Empire collision. I mean, to shout a coronation psalm, publicly invoking the kingdom of David, an independent sovereign Jewish kingdom, while standing in a Roman-occupied city is wild.
It's incredibly dangerous.
It reads less like a parade and much more like a direct political provocation.
It is a massive provocation, especially, when you consider the physical geography of where they are heading. The temple complex didn't just sit in isolation.
Right, the Romans were literally watching them.
Exactly. Looming right over the northwest corner of the temple courts was the Antonia fortress. This was a massive Roman military watchtower. Roman armed guards were stationed there specifically to look down into the temple courts and watch the crowds for any sign of rebellion, especially during Passover.
Wow. So Jesus is riding a prophesied royal mount while a crowd shouts coronation anthems right under the literal noses of the Roman garrison.
Exactly, right in their line of sight.
So you have this incredibly loud, chaotic, politically explosive parade that pushes attention to the absolute breaking point. And then we get what has to be the most shocking anticlimax in the text.
It really is a massive shift in tone.
This is the part that always stops me in my tracks. After all that noise, the text says Jesus enters the temple, looks around at everything in total silence, and because it's late, he just leaves and goes back to Bethany for the night.
Yeah, he just walks away.
Why the silence? I mean, it feels like a CEO walking into a failing factory, staring at the machinery while everyone holds their breath, and then just turning around and walking out. That pregnant pause is terrifying. What exactly is he looking for?
Well, the silence is where the real drama is. He is taking a complete audit of the religious and economic system. And to understand what he found during that silent audit, we have to look at the text's sharpest editorial move.
The sandwich, right?
Yes. Scholars often refer to how Mark structures this section as the fig tree sandwich.
See, I've always just read the fig tree story as a weird, out-of-character moment where Jesus gets mad at a plant for not having fruit out of season. But you're saying Mark actually uses it as a narrative bracket.
He absolutely does. Mark intentionally wraps the confrontation at the temple completely inside the story of the fig tree to explain exactly what Jesus was looking at during that silent pause.
Okay, so how does that mechanism work?
It unfolds over 3 distinct days. On day 1, as you mentioned, we have the silent survey of the temple. Then the next morning, on day 2, Jesus is on his way back into Jerusalem and he spots a leafy fig tree in the distance.
Right, and he goes up to it, finds it has no fruit, and curses it, saying, "May no one ever eat fruit from you again."
Exactly. And immediately after that, he marches straight into Jerusalem and clears the temple. Finally, on day 3, as they walk past that exact same spot, the disciples point out that the fig tree is withered and dead all the way down to the roots.
That 3-day structure is fascinating. But why a fig tree? If you're building a metaphor for the entire religious system of Israel, why not use an olive tree or a cedar?
Because a first-century audience would be intimately familiar with the prophetic literature of the Hebrew Bible. Books like Jeremiah, Hosea, and Micah frequently used the fig tree as a standing symbol for Israel's covenant conditions.
Oh, so it's a well-established symbol.
Very well established. The mechanics of the metaphor Mark is drawing are impossible to miss once you know the prophets. The fig tree looks vibrant and alive from a distance because it is covered in leaves. But upon closer inspection, it produces absolutely no fruit.
So the tree is the visual aid for what he saw during the silent audit of the temple. The temple looks operational. It's covered in leaves.
Right. It has all the outward signs.
Yeah, it has the ceremony, the continuous sacrifices, the beautiful chanting, the massive crowds. But when he inspects the actual machinery of it, it is fundamentally barren of justice.
Which is why the curse on the tree is actually a pronouncement on the temple. Both are operating under a facade of life, but both are fundamentally dead.
I'm so glad you brought up the mechanics of the temple being barren of justice, because I think this is where we need a major reality check.
Yeah, people definitely misunderstand this part.
I grew up thinking this event was basically a noise complaint. Like, people were selling souvenirs and doves too loudly in church, and Jesus just wanted a quiet, reverent place to pray. But framing it as an issue of volume completely misses the scale of what is happening.
It misses the point entirely.
When he overturns the money changers' tables and the dove sellers' chairs, whose pockets is he actually emptying? Walk us through the economics of this.
Well, if we follow the money, we end up right at the top of the political food chain. We have to understand that the temple in the first century wasn't simply a house of worship, it was the fiscal and political nerve center of Judea.
It was basically the national bank.
Exactly. The national bank, the treasury, and the seat of local government all rolled into one. The Sanhedrin, which was the ruling council composed of chief priests, scribes, and elders, operated as a client institution under strict Roman oversight.
Meaning the high priest wasn't just a religious figure. He was a political appointee.
Precisely. The high priest at the time, Caiaphas, held that position only because he was useful to the Roman prefect. He served at Rome's pleasure, and his job was to keep the peace and keep the tribute flowing.
So the religious leadership and the Roman occupation were inextricably intertwined economically.
They absolutely were.
So how does tipping over tables threaten that massive political machine? Let's break down the money changers first. Why were they even there in the temple courts to begin with?
It comes down to the currency laws. Roman imperial coinage was the standard currency of the empire, but it bore the engraved image of the Roman emperor, often with inscriptions declaring him divine.
Right, which breaks strict Jewish laws against graven images and idolatry.
Exactly. Because of those laws, that Roman money could not be used to pay the mandatory half-shekel temple tax or buy offerings. So Jewish pilgrims traveling from all over the known world had to exchange their Roman or foreign currency for acceptable image-free Tyrian shekels.
Okay, I want to make sure I'm wrapping my head around this. It's basically like going to an international airport. You land, and you have to use the airport currency exchange to buy anything.
Right, and you have to accept whatever rates they give you.
But in this case, the currency exchange is mandated by God, and the people controlling the exchange rate are also the government and the religious leaders. If you don't use their exact coins, paying whatever markup they demand, you literally cannot participate in your own religion. It's a total monopoly on access to God.
That is an excellent analogy. It was a captive market, and the exchange rate was heavily controlled to ensure profit. And then you have the dove sellers, which represents an even darker side of this economic system.
Right, because doves seem so innocent. Why target the people selling birds?
Because of who is buying them. According to the Torah, doves or pigeons were the permitted sacrificial animals for purification rites for those who were too poor to afford a lamb or a larger animal.
Oh, so they were targeting the poor.
Yes. The dove sellers were supplying essential religious infrastructure, but they were doing it for the most impoverished, vulnerable people in this society.
So by blockading the temple courts and deliberately overturning these specific tables and chairs, Jesus is physically disrupting a massive exploitative revenue system.
A system that extracted wealth from the poorest pilgrims, enriched the priestly aristocracy, and ultimately fed Roman imperial finances through various tribute arrangements.
It's a full economic blockade.
Uh-huh.
And the physical geography of where this happens adds an entirely different layer of indictment. Where exactly are these tables set up?
This raised a massive theological issue because the market was set up in the court of the Gentiles. You see, the Jerusalem temple was an ongoing, massive construction project under Herod the Great's building program.
It is huge, right?
One of the largest religious complexes in the ancient world. It was divided into concentric courts with increasing levels of restriction. The outermost zone was the court of the Gentiles, and it was a massive, paved plaza.
And crucially, it was the only space in the entire complex where non-Jews were permitted to gather, worship, and pray to the God of Israel.
Exactly. It was the only accessible area for outsiders.
Which gives so much teeth to the specific words Jesus uses while he is physically shutting down the economy. Let's look at the text in Mark 11:17. He is teaching them and saying, "Isn't it written, 'My house will be called a house of prayer for all the nations,' but you have made it a den of robbers."
It is a devastating two-pronged indictment. He is quoting two different prophets simultaneously. First, Isaiah 56, which envisions the temple as a welcoming place for all nations, for the foreigners.
And second,
And second, Jeremiah 7, which warns against turning God's house into a den of robbers, a safe haven where unjust people hide after exploiting others.
man, he's pointing out the ultimate hypocrisy. The religious elite had colonized the one physical space meant to welcome outsiders and turned it into a commercial marketplace to extract wealth.
That's exactly it.
Which brings the entire fig tree metaphor full circle. The tree has massive green leaves. The temple has massive, beautiful stones, a bustling economy, all the outward signs of a thriving religious center.
But there is no fruit.
Exactly, no fruit. There is no justice for the poor buying doves, and there is no space for the outsiders who have been crowded out of the court of the Gentiles. By the end of this chapter, one of these things is dead at the roots, and the other has a death warrant out for the man who exposed it.
The text is entirely explicit about that death warrant, actually. In Mark 11.18, it says, "The chief priests and the scribes heard his indictment and began seeking how they might destroy him."
So the decision is made right then and there.
Yes. The decision to assassinate him is finalized right here on this day. The formal trial that happens later in the week is nothing more than the execution of a pre-existing verdict.
So Jesus has effectively bankrupted their religious and political nerve center. They want to kill him, and they want to do it right now. But they don't arrest him on the spot. Why? I mean, they have the temple guard. They have the authority. Why do they just let him leave again on day 2?
Because of the logistics of the Passover crowd. The text notes that they feared him because the entire multitude was astonished at his teaching.
Right. The crowds were huge.
Massive. Jerusalem's population typically hovered around maybe 50,000 people. But during the Passover festival, hundreds of thousands of pilgrims flooded into the city. The atmosphere is highly charged, nationalistic, and tense.
And earlier that same week, this exact crowd was shouting coronation songs for him.
Exactly. So if the Sanhedrin arrests a popular Galilean prophet in broad daylight in the middle of the crowded temple courts, they risk inciting an immediate riot.
And remember the Antonia fortress looming right over them.
Yes. If a riot breaks out, the Roman garrison will not ask questions. They will intervene with lethal military force to crush the disturbance. If that happens, the Roman prefect will hold Caiaphas responsible for failing to keep the peace.
And the Sanhedrin could lose all their delegated power.
Exactly. They are trapped. They desperately need a moment without witnesses to take him quietly.
That means they are forced to do the one thing they didn't want to do, confront him publicly, to his face, to find a legal loophole. Which brings us to the final showdown on day 3. I look at this scene like a high-stakes legal deposition.
It absolutely is.
Jesus is back in the temple walking around, and the highest religious court in the land, the chief priests, the scribes, and the elders, approach him publicly in verse 28 and demand his credentials.
They want him to slip up.
Right. They ask, by what authority do you do these things?
Yeah.
Or who gave you this authority to do these things? They aren't asking out of theological curiosity. This is a highly calculated legal trap.
It is a perfectly constructed pincer movement. The Sanhedrin needs legally actionable grounds to arrest him cleanly.
So what are their options?
Well, if Jesus answers by naming God as his direct source of authority for shutting down the temple, the Sanhedrin can immediately charge him with blasphemy, which carries a death sentence under Jewish law.
And the other option?
On the other hand, if he claims independent political authority, acting as a king or a rebel leader, they can hand him straight over to the Romans on charges of sedition, which carries the Roman penalty of crucifixion.
Wow. Either way, he incriminates himself, and they have their pre-existing verdict justified. So how does he dismantle a trap that perfect? Because he doesn't just refuse to answer and walk away. He turns the trap completely inside out.
He neutralizes their legal attack by asking a counter question about John the Baptist. He says, I will ask you one question, and if you answer me, I will tell you by what authority I do these things.
Okay, what's the question?
He asks, was the baptism of John from heaven or from men?
Oh, that is brilliant.
Yeah.
He puts the Sanhedrin in an impossible bind.
The mechanics of his counter question completely paralyze them. The text shows them reasoning among themselves. If they say John's authority was from heaven, Jesus will simply ask them why they didn't believe John's message.
It exposes their spiritual illegitimacy.
Exactly.
But if they say it was just from men, that John was just some crazy guy in the desert making things up, they risk the wrath of the crowds.
The text says they were afraid of the people because everyone held that John was a true prophet. So they can't say it's from heaven without indicting themselves, and they can't say it's from men without sparking the very riot they're trying to avoid.
They are legally, politically, and socially paralyzed.
Completely.
Which leads to verse 33, which might be one of the most stunning moments of the entire narrative. The highest religious court in Judea is forced to answer a Galilean carpenter in public by saying, we don't know.
It's incredible.
And Jesus responds, neither do I tell you by what authority I do these things. The interrogation completely collapses. He didn't just physically disrupt their financial center. He publicly dismantled their intellectual and legal authority in front of the very crowds they were trying to control.
The historical irony of that moment is profound. These men are the official arbiters of religious authority in Judea. They are standing in the very temple complex they control, surrounded by their own guards.
And yet they have to back down.
Yet they are forced to publicly confess ignorance just to avoid a trap they themselves set. The system is entirely dead at the roots.
When you look at the systems and structures around you today, whether they are religious, corporate, or political, well, are you seeing actual fruit or just a lot of impressive leaves?
That's the real question.
It takes immense courage to walk into the center of power, look at the machinery in silence, and call it out for what it actually is. To look at a system that everyone assumes is too big to fail and declare that it is fundamentally barren.
It really does.
We covered a ton of ground today, and I want to hear from you. Which detail blew your mind the most? Was it the geographical collision of the two parades entering the city, or the dark economics behind the dove sellers in the court of the Gentiles?
The economics always get me.
Right. Drop a comment and let us know what stood out to you. If you're enjoying this type of deep historical analysis where we strip away the common assumptions and look right at the mechanics of the text, please make sure to like and subscribe.
It definitely helps us out.
It helps us out and tells us you want more of this content. Also, be sure to check the description below for exclusive links to sources and further reading on absolutely everything we unpacked today.
Lots of great stuff down there.
The interrogation has completely collapsed. The highest religious court in Judea has been publicly paralyzed and humiliated. But remember the verdict from verse 18. The assassination decision has already been made. The leadership is just waiting for a moment without the crowds. What happens when this pre-existing verdict is finally executed? We'll see how the text moves from a paralyzed court to a deadly conclusion in the next chapter.